The story continues on a starry night in Chengdu. Runju asks Wool where he's been this whole time. She says it feels like she's been waiting forever. Wool thought he was meeting with Runju alone, but it turns out he's also meeting with Mariang and Dayoshi. They eat dinner together and Mariang introduces himself as the captain of the Black Cloud Corps. Mariang tells Wool that he's heard a lot about him. He also says that Runju has taken a great interest in him, so he wanted to meet him at least once. Now that the two are meeting face to face, Mariang can see how strong Wool is. Mariang says to Wool, though you're concealing that intense energy of yours very well by drawing attention to your flashy attire and appearance, you cannot hide everything. The energy that leaks out of you is abnormal. Runju is feeling good about the interaction so far. Mariang says he's going to get straight to the point and tries to recruit Wool to the Black Cloud Corps. He says people only view them as a group of vagabonds, but he has a dream. Mariang's dream is to make the Black Cloud Corps an acknowledged section. To make that happen, he knows he needs every capable person they can get. Mariang says he's willing to offer Wool anything he desires. He says he'd even offer him Runju. Dayoshi can't wait to watch what happens next. He thinks it's interesting that Runju is acting like she's not interested in Wool when he knows the truth. Dayoshi is eager to see how Wool will respond. Wool says that's not an attractive offer and Dayoshi can't keep his drink in. He apologizes for the interruption and tells them to continue. Mariang turns back to Wool and asks what's not to like, joining the corpse or Runju. Wool says everything. He'd rather not lay his hands on food that's obviously bound to spoil. Runju can't believe she's just been rejected. There's an awkward moment of silence and Mariang bursts out laughing. He says it was just a joke. He stands up and says to Wool, "You have no idea how valuable Runju is." Mariang offers Wool a piece of advice. He says, "Try not to come face to face with our corpse. I like to have conversations, but the others like to take action first." Wool says, "Let me say something as well. If you're suddenly beheaded while walking down the road one day, you can think of it as my doing." Mariang nervously smirks and Wool says, "It's just a joke." But Mariang's not laughing. Later on, a disciple returns with an update to Chong. Chong wants to know what the Emu sect is up to. The disciple says the Emu sect hasn't taken a single step out of the 100-flower room. He says he's dispatched a few of the disciples around the 100-flower room just in case. Chong says they have to track down the scoundrel who killed the young leader of the Thunder Clan as soon as possible. That way, they can unveil the truth and take the necessary countermeasures. The disciple says they'd know the movements in the backwaters best. He says he's sure they know who approached everyone on the Thunder Clan that day, since their eyes are spread all over Sichuan like a spider web. Chong says he'd rather not use them, but leaves it up to the disciple. The disciple says he will not disappoint. Chong looks out into the night sky and thinks more sects are involved in this than he expected. The Thunder Clan, the Golden Heaven Clan, and even the 100-flower room. Who knows how many problems could arise if the assassin is not caught quickly. Down the street, we see a spy trying to collect information on Wool. He was sure that he'd received confirmation of him being inside, but he can't feel his presence at all. The spy knows Wool is extraordinary, but he can't believe that he can't even hear a single breath. The spy looks out the window and gives the signal. The signal is accepted and taken back to Yang, the Black Cloud Corps vice captain. The ninja says to Yang, the first-class surveillance target has made no movements all night, and now that the sun will rise, they will switch from long-range surveillance to close range. Good, Yang says. The captain seems to be quite bothered by him, so tell them to continue surveilling him without dropping their guard even for a moment. The ninja heads off to deliver the message and Yang decides to get back to work. He's analyzing a problem with the gates at the foot of Mount Qingchang. He recalls that the power of the Black Cloud Corps cannot be used in these gates. They need to drag them down to the foot of the mountain to effectively make use of their 200 horses. As he thinks how he could make that happen, he senses something wrong and throws daggers to the ceiling. He sees nothing there and wonders if he's being overly sensitive. Yang was sure he felt something, but believes he may have been mistaken since he's so on edge. Meanwhile, at the 100 Flower Room, Jianghu tells Young to go back to Mount Emu. Young asks why. Jianghu says there's nothing for her to do anymore now that the negotiation was a success and it'd be best for her to return to Ran. Young says she can't go back because they can clash with the Qingchang sect in Chengdu at any moment. Young wants to stay and support Jianghu. Jianghu says worst case scenario, she'll just use the Black Cloud Corps as her meat shields. She wants Young to do as she says. Young sighs and accepts Jianghu's request, though she clearly does not want to. Jianghu tells Young she can leave first thing in the morning. After Young leaves the room, Lady Wu enters. Lady Wu says she thought Jianghu would like some company. Jianghu appreciates the thought and asks Lady Wu if she's seen anyone. She notices her complexion looks much healthier. Lady Wu says she has and he is quite the use to him. She then spits out that she thinks the man she's seen is the one who killed the young leader of the Thunder Clan. Jianghu is shocked and asks if she is certain. Lady Wu realizes she may have revealed too much information and says she has no proof. She also says she'd introduce him to her when she finds out if he did it or not. Jianghu asks for his name, but before Lady Wu can tell her, they are interrupted. The two run to see what's going on and the disciples say Go is dead. They believe this was the Qingchang sect's doing. Fuel has now been added to the fire. The next morning, Mariang and his vice captain Yang head to the flower room. Mariang informs his vice captain that an Emu sect disciple was found dead. He worries he may have chosen the wrong side of the war. Yang says this isn't terrible news, as they might need them even more now. But the fact that there's an assassin of this level in Sichuan is strange. After the fall of the Blood Shadow Group 7 years ago, not a single assassin group has set foot in Sichuan. As they wonder who it could be, Mariang says there's no way a prestigious orthodox sect like the Qingchang sect could have hired an assassin. Yang suggests a third party could have intervened. One person comes to mind for Mariang. Mariang then asks if their spy reported anything unordinary. Yang says the spy reported that Wool hasn't set foot outside in 4 days. Yang knows the spy is very talented, so there isn't a doubt in his mind. Mariang asks Yang if he's sure it couldn't have been Wool. Yang says, considering the circumstances until now, yes. Mariang trusts his vice captain, so he tells him to tell the spy to stop watching Wool for now and focus on figuring out the Qingchang sect movements. Mariang and his vice captain meet with Jianghu and offer their condolences. Jianghu says she called them here today because she wants them to look at her disciples' wounds. She thought they were simple wounds at first, but quickly realized they weren't. Mariang takes a look and is puzzled. The wounds are overly thin and sharp, so it can't be a sword or a dagger. He thinks maybe a silver wire, but no matter how sharp a silver wire is, there's no way it would have prevented the skin from curling up. Not even someone as experienced as him has seen something like this before. Jianghu asks him. Mariang says that's correct. Jianghu then asks if there's anyone he suspects. Wool comes to his mind once again, but it can't be him, he thinks. Mariang apologizes to Jianghu and says he can't give her the answers she desires. Jianghu asks when all of Mariang's forces will return to Chengdu. Mariang says they will all return in 2 days, but the Qingchang sect will be wary if the cavalrymen enter Chengdu. Jianghu says she doesn't care. They will crush them in a flash. Mariang asks if she is planning on waging a frontal assault right away. Jianghu says she said she would give Mariang what he wanted, so he shouldn't be afraid. She says she'd rather die than live under the same sky as the Qingchang sect. Mariang and his vice captain understand, but no one notices who's behind her. The night time comes and we're brought to the hospital. We see one of Mariang's men severely injured. Mariang asks to know what happened to O. Runju says they went to see Wool and got completely messed up. Furious, Mariang demands to hear the whole story. Runju recalls the story and starts from the beginning. Runju spotted Wool eating and approached him. Wool clearly wanted to eat in peace. Runju said she was just checking up on him. She wanted to apologize for being disrespectful during their meeting with Mariang. Wool said he didn't care. Runju tried to act like his response didn't bother her, but it did. She then asks Wool to think about Mariang's offer again, but as they were conversing, they were interrupted by Oh. Irritated, she was no longer alone with Wool. Runju asked Oh why he was following her. Oh said he was just coming to get her because Mariang wanted her. Oh then introduced himself to Wool. Runju noticed Oh had no intentions of leaving, so she got even more annoyed. Oh tried striking a conversation with Wool, but Runju wanted him to stop. Wool said he'd give Oh one chance to leave him alone. He told him to turn away before he counted to 3. Wool said if he didn't, he'd make it so that Oh can't see anything until the day he dies. Clearly unaware of what Wool was capable of, Oh began to calm himself down. He reached a count of 3 and he didn't move. Wool took his chopsticks and went right for Oh's eyes. Surprisingly, Oh was prepared and blocked the attack. Oh then went for an attack of his own, but he never had a chance of actually hitting Wool. Wool evaded and began his own attack. Runju tried to stop the fight, as she knew things were about to get worse, but it was too late. Oh was suffocated and severely injured. Wool then picked up Oh's head and shoved his fingers right into his eyes. Wool was done and ready to walk away, but Runju was not happy. She sent an attack at Wool, but when he turned to face her, she offered a truce. She told Wool she didn't come to see him for a fight and Oh has already paid the price for interrupting them. She said there's no more blood to spill. Without words, Wool accepted and turned away. Runju took a sigh of relief and had a final message for Wool. She told him he's really unpredictable and despite everything Oh did, she couldn't believe Wool took it that far. She told Wool to be careful. If he keeps acting as he likes without caution, he won't be able to avoid unexpected misfortune. Her threat meant nothing to Wool and he walked away. He was just upset his clothes were ruined because his girlfriend from the brothel gave them to him. After hearing Runju's story, Mariang is left baffled. He's angry to have lost such an important member at such a crucial time. Runju says at this point, her pride is so hurt she can't handle it. She vows to make sure Wool will pay for this humiliation. Mariang says that's a good choice. They can dispose of him once the matter with the Ching-Chong sect is resolved. Runju agrees. As they go their separate ways, Mariang says they'll make their move as soon as they regroup with the cavalrymen. Make ample preparations. Runju responds. Later on, we see Chong meeting with the ignoble clan branch manager. Chong wants to find the culprit who killed the young leader of the Thunder clan. The manager says that's as difficult as finding a needle in the haystack. The only clue is that they use a martial art of the Ching-Chong sect. Chong asks if there are any rumors of anyone standing out in Chengdu. The manager says there is one. A man named Wool. They say he possesses beauty that can charm others and is a ruthless master whose skill can't be described with words. Chong asks if that means he has something to do with the death of the Thunder clan's young leader. The branch manager says that he doesn't know, but he does know he fits the conditions of people that Chong is looking for best. Chong makes his payment and walks away. As the manager reflects on this interaction, he wonders if Wool could be the culprit. He grabs one of his books and looks up Wool's name. The manager doesn't find out much about Wool that isn't already known. He asks himself if this could really be the assassin that killed Nam Hosen. The manager plans to send this information to the headquarters so they could handle it. In doing so, Wool will have to live under the ignoble clan's watchful eyes. But to his surprise, Wool was watching him the whole time. Now he can't move and Wool takes his book. Wool's soul-reaping thread is a wire made from his chi, invisible to the eye of everyone. The manager turns to Wool and asks who he is. Wool says he's impressed that the manager has investigated him. He says it hasn't even been that long since he's entered Chengdu. The manager says the ignoble clan will not stand for it if Wool harms him. Wool says he knows and that's why he's there. The manager asks why. Wool says he doesn't like his information spreading around without his permission. The manager realizes who he's talking to and asks if it's Wool. Wool says he's right. The manager wonders why Wool is exposing his identity like this and wonders if Wool is trying to silence him by killing him. The manager begs Wool to spare his life, as no one has seen the book yet. Wool says that's laughable, because he was saying Wool's name very openly earlier. The manager begins to panic and tries to break free. The manager breaks loose for a second and tries to attack with his pushing shadow hand. Wool is not fazed and uses his soul-reaping thread to finish the manager. Wool leaves the manager lifeless and takes his book. Somewhere in Chengdu, there's an explosion. The Qingchang sect and the Emu sect are facing off. Buildings are on fire and Mariang feels as if he's living in a nightmare. The two sects fight as they've both reached their tipping points. Mariang and the Black Cloud Corps are left watching. The Fire Dragon Master Po yells for everyone to stop fighting, but he gets hit in the crossfire. Po's clan retaliates and they join in on the war. Mariang is in disbelief. He says the Emu sect is currently at a disadvantage because they lack forces. Mariang has no choice and summons the entire Black Cloud Corps. He is prepared to join the fray. The war continues and Jianghu joins Zen. She charges right towards the Qingchang sect. Jianghu then faces off with Chong. How dare you send an assassin to kill my disciple? And how could Qingchang still call itself a reputable sect of the Jianghu, she asks. Chong says, you are the ones who crossed the Qingchang sect first and you hired an assassin to kill Wu Gun. Are you not the ones behind the murder of the Thunder Clan's young leader as well, he asks. Jianghu says she heard the assassin used the sword technique of the Qingchang sect. She then rushes at Chong for trying to pin this on them. As she attacks, she yells, one of us will be buried here today. Chong is ready for battle as they clash. Young is trying to do her part in the war. She fights off a few Qingchang sect disciples, but she is unable to protect the disciple with her. Young cries for her junior sister and tells her to circulate her aura, but the disciple is in too much pain and she can't. The disciple passes and Young breaks down while holding the lifeless disciple. Young thinks about how this whole war was instigated by the Emu sect. That's why she was hesitant to join the war against the Qingchang sect. But because of her indecisiveness, the sect disciples are now dying. She tells herself she can't keep dodging the issue any longer. Another explosion goes off near Yang and he wonders where his forces are. Mariang calls for Seo, one of his members. He says things are flowing strangely. The people who went to gather the forces haven't returned and everything just feels contrived, as if someone is adding fuel to the flames. Mariang tells Seo to leave the battle and search the area. Check if there really is such a person. Seo flies over the war. He thinks this is the epitome of madness. Both forces have put the assassination incident aside and are simply tearing each other apart. The captain is right. There must be someone inciting such a situation to happen. He wonders where such a person would be, since there are battles everywhere you go. They wouldn't be in a building that could collapse at any moment and there doesn't seem to be anyone like that among those fighting either. He tries hard to think of where they could possibly be. Then he sees the tree that is considered to be sacred in Chengdu. It's perfect enough to be able to view all the surroundings. Seo hops on the tree and checks if the person is hiding inside. Then from the corner of his eye, he sees someone hiding in the tree. Someone in a black warrior robe with red eyes. The man activates his daggers and Seo is amazed at the skill. The daggers are headed right towards him and he wonders if this is a telekinetic sword technique. He doesn't understand how a master like this could be in Chengdu. Seo is no match and is now being strangled by the man. As Seo fights for air, the man approaches him and finishes him off. Then the man goes back to watching the war from a distance. He watches as Jianghu has fallen to Chong. Chong stands victorious and Jianghu is severely injured. Young rushes to her side and asks if she's alright. Jianghu can't answer and Young takes her back to the 100-flower room. As Chong watches them leave, his junior brothers rush in for help, but Chong says it's time to go as well. Both sects withdraw their forces, as Jianghu's wounds are serious. This is all news that the disguised man, Wool, likes to hear. The next morning, Mariang is shown 2 corpses. He asks who killed these people and Dayoshi says they were killed by the same person. The marks on their necks are identical. Based on the size and shape of the wounds, the assailant probably used either a short sword or a dagger. Mariang then recalls those wounds were caused by daggers as well. He calls for O and he was right. The wounds are exactly the same. Mariang knows exactly what this means. Wool is the one who killed the ignoble clan branch manager and Seo. Mariang demands for Wool to be brought to him immediately. He says he'll interrogate him himself. Back at the 100-flower room, 2 disciples are discussing the severity of Jianghu's injuries as they contemplate what snacks to eat. Young tells them to pull themselves together. She says to check the defenses of the 100-flower room, because the Qingchang sect can attack at any second. She also wants a messenger pigeon sent to the main sect right away. Young wants to inform them of everything that's happened and call for reinforcements. Young believes the deaths of her disciple and the Thunder Clan's young leader increased the hostility between the 2 sects and it grew way out of hand. She knows someone is intentionally causing strife between the 2 sects, but she needs to find out who. Inside, Jianghu lays on her bed. Her injuries are critical and she needs to stay as calm as possible, but she doesn't want any advice from the doctor and tells him to get lost before she cuts his head off. He exits the room and she thinks of this sorry state she's in. She doesn't want Young to take initiatives, so she wants to recover quickly. The door opens and Jianghu thinks it's the doctor again. Without looking up, she tells him to get lost. After not receiving a response, she looks up and asks this person who he is. "Don't you remember me?" he asks Jianghu. He approaches Jianghu and she asks if he knows her. "Of course," the man responds. "I've never forgotten you for a single moment in the past 7 years. I wonder if you'll remember if I blind the last eye you have," he asks. Then Jianghu remembers. "It's Wool from back then." "Long time no see," Wool says. "How are you here?" Jianghu asks. "You definitely died back then. The Qingchang sect's greatest warrior threw you into the snake hole," she says. "Yeah, he did," Wool says. "But now it's time for me to mess you up." "I'm the one," he says. "The person who killed your disciple and the Thunder Clan's young leader. How dare you kill our disciple?" Jianghu responds. "Are you trying to make an enemy of the Emu sect after killing one of us? Do you think it's easy to continue with the rest? Are you not afraid at all?" she asks. She asks all this not calmly. Jianghu is clearly suffering. "You guys made me this way," Wool says. "We were all your creations. Without you guys, there's no way we could have been reborn as assassins." In pain, Jianghu asks Wool what he wants. He says he doesn't want anything. He just wants to let her know what will happen to the Emu sect from now on. Wool says it'll be good for them, because he's going to kill Chong of the Qingchang sect today. He'll be killed by one of the ultimate techniques of the Emu sect, the snow cloud piercing strike. And it just so happens that Young uses the snow cloud piercing strike. Jianghu can't take it anymore and says she ought to kill Wool right now. Wool says the Qingchang sect and the Emu sect will spill each other's blood. Both sides will end up with huge losses. The blood of the monsters crouching in the mountains will also be spilled. People like Ran and the Qingchang sect's greatest warrior. Jianghu wants to get rid of Wu so badly, but she has no life left. Wu says he will pull everyone out from hiding and he'll make sure to devour everyone. Jianghu uses her last breath of air to call Wu a bastard and she collapses. Wu says she should have never created something like him. Someone as horrifying as he is.